Let's get going into the envelope system. A little bit more nuts and bolts. A lot of you folks are already familiar with some of the stuff I'm going to cover in the next 5 slides, but just sort of as a terminology standpoint, so that we can all get on the same page in terms of the way I'm using these terms. So when we talk about building envelope system, there's 2 main components to it. We're talking about the structure, and we're talking about the control layers. With the structure, we have the foundation, we have the above grade framing. So these are 2 components that are critical to the building, but they're also separated in the fact that the foundation is still delivered the way we always have done foundations, and that the above grade framing is where our system picks up and sets on top. But we do have requirements of the below grade foundation so that they can behave and play well together. And then we have the control layers, which we've talked about before. So air, vapor, thermal, and water. And so just to sort of talk through in general what those are typically on houses and where those get delivered. If you're building a regular category 1 stud frame house with cavity insulation, and it happens to be a fiberglass, or category 1 fiberglass with air and vapor control on the inside, you're installing some sort of either a bat or a blown-in product into the cavity. You're putting a 4 or 6 mil polyethylene sheet on the inside of the building, and then you're applying tape and acoustic sealant, which is sort of like a caulking. It's more of a trowelable gasket to control air leakage and simultaneously control vapor. And then your thermal control is the insulation in the cavity. And then when we go to the water control, you start up at the top with the roof and all of its components and systems, and then you move down to the WRB and the windows and the doors and their flashing system. And then I always like to say, whether I'm right or wrong, but the cladding system is just there to protect the WRB, right? That's its job, and it looks good. The below grade structure, so the foundation, concrete walls and slab. Nothing that I think most of you folks haven't already done or seen in that system. Water control, thermal control, air vapor control, and radon. So let's talk a little bit about those here. On the concrete walls and the slab, and this is the one little caveat to this presentation, is I've got to jump back and forth to my file for photos. I've been on a PC for a while. So generally, this is a foundation that is in place and backfilled, ready for the framing to begin. There's nothing about this that's unusual. Some of the key components to this foundation that we got to make sure is that we're dealing with and managing water from the ground coming up, and we're dealing with water from the ground coming down. Water from the ground coming up typically shows up and enters the building through contact with the structure, and then wicks up through that structure through capillary action. And so when we put the footing down, our footing is the thing that's in bare contact with the ground. On the top surface of that footing, we want to apply some material that breaks the capillary action. Okay. Throughout the field of the footing, underneath the slab, we're going to be using a gravel field. And the gravel field also is a capillary break, also provides us with some bulk water storage. If we do have water that comes up into the system, we have a place for it to go, and then we have to provide a pathway to manage that water out, and we do that through our drain tile and sump system. I think it's important to keep in mind with water in a building, we're not stopping water. Nobody does. We're just managing it, and the best way to manage it is to provide it with a really simple path out of the system, and make sure that that is readily available for water. On the foundation, underneath the slab, we're going to be installing, or on top of the gravel, we'll be installing 2 inches of an XPS extruded polystyrene foam. This is going to give us some thermal control into the slab, and then we'll be installing a 6 mil polyethylene sheet over the top of that for air and vapor control. Inside of that field, we'll also be grabbing, so here's some pictures of a block wall foundation that you guys will never do, so that was one of the photos we had. Outboard of the foundation, we're going to be applying a waterproofing membrane. And as you can see, that's sprayed from top of the wall all the way down over the top of the footing. And most of you folks are familiar with this product or products similar to this. And then outboard of that, we're going to be applying an exterior insulation system. Now, there's two types of systems that we can do on the exterior. One is insulation that contains a drainage product, and the other is insulation that doesn't contain drainage, in which case then we have this really sort of awkward code step that we've got to do with a slip sheet. But the idea with drainage is if water builds up in the soils around the foundation, what we're doing is we're providing a place for that water that gets up against the foundation wall to go. We're going to direct it down to a perimeter drain tile, and then that perimeter drain tile will collect in the sump, and then a sump pump will evacuate that water out of the system. Did you have something you want to add, Pat?
Well, I just was going to suggest perhaps we don't use the term gravel, because most people, when they hear the term gravel, it has fines in it.
Pea gravel, yeah.
Yeah, or maybe they think pea gravel